You know, every time you step onto a plane, you are taking part in what is, statistically, the safest form of mass transportation ever invented by humans. But that incredible safety record wasn't just designed in a boardroom, it was forged in fire and wreckage, piece by painful piece. Today, we're going to look at exactly how.
So, you have to ask, how did we get here? How did we manage to conquer the very real dangers of sending a metal tube hurtling through the sky miles above the Earth? Well, the answer is actually pretty straightforward, but it's also incredibly sobering.
That's right. Just about every procedure, every checklist, every piece of advanced technology, it exists because at some point, people lost their lives. The absolute darkest moments in aviation history have become the very foundation for the safety that, let's be honest, most of us take for granted today. So let's unpack how that happened. Our story starts back in the 1950s. This was a time when the skies over America were kind of like a huge, unregulated frontier. And on one clear summer morning, high above one of the world's greatest natural wonders, that lack of control turned absolutely deadly. Okay, so picture this. Two planes take off from the exact same airport, just 3 minutes apart. Both are heading east. Now, they were assigned different altitudes, but both flight crews had the same idea. They wanted to give their passengers a spectacular view of the Grand Canyon. So they both ended up at 21,000 feet, completely blind to the fact they were on a collision course.
See, back then, air traffic control was, well, it was mostly just advisory. Once you were out of the airport area, over huge stretches of the country, the main system for avoiding other planes was literally just pilots looking out the window. This idea, see and be seen, was a relic from the old days of slow propeller planes. It was just no match for the speed of modern airliners.
128 people died that day. It was the first time a commercial plane crash had killed over 100 people, and the public outcry was just immense. People were not going to accept this as just the cost of flying. Something had to change.
The Grand Canyon disaster was a brutal, brutal wake-up call. It made it painfully clear that you couldn't just let the skies regulate themselves. A whole new system, a unified system, had to be built from the ground up.
And the results, really fueled by that public pressure, came fast. Within a year, the Federal Aviation Agency, what we now call the FAA, was created. Its job was to modernize the entire system. This meant creating fixed highways in the sky, and most importantly, rolling out radar across the whole country to provide what's called positive control. Think of it this way. They replaced a few stop signs on a gigantic open field with dedicated traffic cops for every single intersection, actively guiding each plane and keeping it inside its own safe bubble of airspace. The legacy of those 128 victims is the very ATC system that keeps us all safe today.
So, while the system in the sky was being fixed, another huge vulnerability was about to be exposed: the system inside the cockpit. We jump forward to 1977, on a fog-choked runway in the Canary Islands, where a breakdown in simple human communication led to the single deadliest accident in the history of aviation.
The whole scene was just total chaos. A bomb threat at a nearby airport forced dozens of planes, including 2 giant 747s, to divert to this tiny regional airport. They were crammed onto taxiways, which meant planes had to backtrack down the active runway just to take off. And to make it all worse, a thick fog rolled in, cutting visibility down to almost nothing.
And right at the heart of this disaster was a catastrophic misunderstanding. The air traffic controller clearly tells the KLM jet to wait for takeoff clearance. But because of radio interference and the pressure to get going, the very experienced, very respected KLM captain thought he was cleared. He radios, "We are now at takeoff," and pushes the throttles forward, accelerating straight toward the Pan Am 747, which was still on that same runway, hidden in the fog.
583 people lost their lives. When investigators untangled what happened, they found a cockpit culture where a junior first officer was basically too intimidated to forcefully challenge a senior captain, even when he had a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong.
The solution that came out of this was nothing short of revolutionary. It was a complete culture shift called Crew Resource Management, or a CRM. What it did was flatten that old military-style hierarchy in the cockpit. It trains and empowers every single crew member, from the first officer to the flight attendants, to speak up if they see something wrong. It makes it clear that the entire team is responsible for safety, not just the captain in the left seat.
All right, so we've talked about failures in the system and failures with human factors. But what happens when the machine itself is fundamentally flawed? This next story is, well, it's a chilling one. It's about a known design flaw that was tragically ignored until it was just too late.
So just minutes after taking off from Paris, the rear cargo door on this DC-10 just ripped off.
The sudden, explosive decompression caused the cabin floor right above it to collapse, and in that floor were all the hydraulic lines, the flight controls. They were completely severed. The pilots were suddenly just passengers. They were totally helpless as the aircraft plunged into a forest below.
Now here's the most devastating part of this whole story. This had happened before. 2 years earlier, an American Airlines DC-10 had the exact same failure. By some miracle of airmanship, that crew managed to wrestle the crippled plane back to the ground, saving everyone on board. So the design flaw in that cargo doors locking mechanism? It was known. It was a known problem. And yet a truly robust, mandatory fix wasn't put in place in time to save Flight 981.
The crash of Turkish Airlines 981 finally forced the issue. Regulators made sweeping changes mandatory, requiring not just stronger locks, but actual fail-safe designs. Now, that's a really crucial concept. It means that even if a part breaks, the whole system is engineered to default to a safe state. A single point of failure can no longer bring down the entire plane.
So from the open skies over the Grand Canyon, to the cramped cockpit in Tenerife, to the very design of the airplane itself, we've seen how disaster drives change. But this whole process, it didn't just stop in the 1970s. This mission to make flying safer is a continuous, unending watch.
I mean, even in our high-tech, modern era, these fundamental lessons still apply. The tragic loss of Lion Air 610 showed how a brand-new automated system getting bad data from a single faulty sensor could completely overwhelm the pilots. It was this terrifying echo of the past, a complex mess of mechanical design and human factors that regulators just hadn't fully seen coming. And, as we all know, it led to the worldwide grounding of the entire 737 MAX fleet until the system was redesigned from the ground up and pilots were retrained.
So when you look back at all of this, you really see that modern aviation safety is built on 4 critical pillars, and each one was learned at an absolutely unbearable cost. You need robust, independent oversight of the whole system. You need clear, unambiguous communication. You need engineering that is genuinely fail-safe. And maybe most of all, you need the humility to accept that the process of learning is never, ever finished.
The history of aviation safety is really a testament to learning from our absolute worst failures. It's a solemn reminder that the calm, almost boring routine flight you take today is the direct result of past tragedies. It's about ensuring that those lessons are never forgotten, so they can serve to protect everyone who travels the skies tomorrow.